Come on, YouTube. There we go. Now we're good. Go live. It's Tuesday, April 6th, 2021. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is GeekNights. Tonight we are talking about JRPGs, the genre. So we didn't want to review the game we just played, and I'm looking at the final seconds of this game. But we're playing another train game right now called 1828.
Let's just become train knights. Forget this Geek Nights business.
I feel like a big reason why we're playing so many train games is because we're stuck inside at home all day, even while we're working. And these train games
happen to come into existence at the exact right time.
We happen to have a group of people who already knew the deal with train games, and they really suit themselves to asynchronous play far more than a lot of other types of games for a lot of reasons we talked about in a recent episode on asynchronous play. So,
yep.
But all I want to say is, it could be a geek bite. This 1828 one intrigues me quite a bit, and I think it's equal in my eyes now to 1817 in terms of want to play it again.
Yeah, this is a good one. This 1828, I would recommend.
Yep, I think and we'll review it at some point. We just don't want to do a million train reviews all in a row, and I've got to play it again. But the thing I'll say is that one of the signs we've noticed of a good train game compared to a mediocre one or just an okay one is if after the first play, we all go, whoa, and then the next time the same group of people play, we play it radically differently. That's usually a sign that it's one that's got some staying power.
Mm-hmm.
If there's one like 1889 I like, but second time I played it, I did the exact same thing I tried to do the first time, just better. Third time, fourth time, every time, it almost always goes the same basic way. But this one looks like it can go in a lot of different directions. And going back through my early moves in this game, what the fuck was wrong with Rim? Why did he wait to par Michigan Central? That was a mistake. There's a lot going on in this one.
I mean, I didn't understand I didn't realize the 8E wasn't just an 8 train.
Yeah, I love how you looked at a 3D and thought, oh, that D, yeah, and you understood the D. That's a big deal. We talked a lot about the D, but at no point where you were like, why does that other train have an E? I guess it's nothing.
I thought to myself, why is there an E? That must mean something. And I'm like, yeah, not going to look it up. Whatever. I'll just play the game. And then it's like, oops, Actually, it was a big deal. I messed it up.
Well, not like the 1817 we played with the listener where I literally just forgot that outstanding market shares dropped stock price at the end of the SR in that one and made a catastrophic error.
Yep.
What I should have done is mutually shorted, and that would have been fun. But instead, I was like, oh, I'm fine. He can't rust any trains. This is going to be fine. And then when the OR starts and I saw the stock price drop, I was like, oh, yeah, 1817. Fuck.
Anyway,
there is a decent amount of gaming news, but what I'm going to start with is that PAX East, this is officially announced. There is going to be no PAX East this year, as we assumed.
Oh, my God. I didn't see that coming. Whoa.
No, better call James Randi. We got a Nostradamus here. But
you're going to need a Nostradamus to call James Randi.
Yep. Rest in peace. You were a cool dude. But PAX East, there's going to be no PAX East this year because April, May, probably June. I'm not going to speculate about the rest of the year in terms of odds of a convention happening, but spring and early summer is just off the table. It is too soon. Things are still evolving. I applaud PAX for making this decision. They have a statement that we'll just link to. But also, they're going to do another PAX Online because it actually went really well. And whatever that looks like, we're going to be there for it.
All right, sure.
Maybe we'll do a new panel. I got a panel I've been working on. I've done some research. I've got a little bit of data, but I got to get more. The problem is to get more data, you know what I got to do? I actually have to go record myself playing Team Fortress 2 with randos.
Okay.
I literally need a few hours of footage of me earnestly trying to play Team Fortress 2 online against real people trying to win. And I need to do it with every single character class. So I need 2-ish hours of my own play for every character class as data for this panel. Thankfully, I already have more than that for Overwatch because that's almost all I play these days. But I look forward to a PAX Online. I think it's the right decision. We'll see if PAX West happens. I think that's iffy because even if September, a miracle happens and the world is way safer, my suspicion is it's going to be too late to plan September cons, especially cons that involve a big industry presence. So we'll see. I feel like PAX Unplugged is the first big convention that has a chance of happening that I would like.
It has a chance, but I'm not even going to give it a 50% chance.
No,
right?
but it's one where if I was in a casino when I saw those odds, I might throw a little bit of money at it.
If you have to bet on one, right?
Yeah.
And it's like if you made a game and the game was okay, here's a list of all PAXs for the next 3 years, right? Put a token on the first PAX that will happen without going over. It's either that one or soon after is where
it's either that or it's like,
right?
I don't even know about South because the whole Texas situation, so it might be East if it's not unplugged.
Yeah, all right. It's like that's the area where the tokens with the current odds are likely to lay, right? So yeah.
Yep.
All right. So E3, the horrible conference that's existed our whole lives, which is
it had such a mystique. Like before we knew what it was like in those early internet days, like early Penny Arcade days, there was a weird mystique. Like everyone wanted to go to
even
E3
in the 90s.
Yeah,
because it was like, hey, all the big video game companies get together in this place once a year and show off all the new video games before anywhere else.
And there weren't really like big fan cons like you know them today that were gaming focused,
right.
that weren't weird.
The only thing you could only experience E3 through the pages of a video game magazine, right? Like someone telling you, I went to this amazing Holy Land. Let me tell you about it with some photos and some text. And it's like, holy.
Like I'd see a photo and be like, wait, are they playing a prototype of hardware that didn't come out yet? I would like salivate over those images.
Right, and there was like this mysterious, what was like Hall E or something? Like there was supposedly this hall that had like, the small time rando stuff that was like these probably
not to be confused with the special hall at the San Diego Comic-Con. That's a whole other thing. Yep. Hall D, I forget which one's which. It all blurs together.
Right. The San Diego Comic-Con one is just a big panel room that has the big lines and the big celebrities. The one at the E3 is like the secret room where the small time places are showing off these, rarity games.
Yep, like, hey kid, here's the good stuff.
Right, exactly. Anyway, the point is obviously E3 is, it's gone up, it's gone down, up and down, all over the place, bad, good, getting their lunch eaten by PAX, who knows? Companies have left saying, we don't need you, we'll do all our own thing. Oh wait, we'll come back and we'll work with you. We're going to not happen, we're going to happen. Pandemic reasons, other reasons. What's happening with E3 this year? E3 is not only happening this year, it's an online-only deal, and all the big companies seem to be going in on it. Nintendo is like, yeah, okay, E3, we'll come and do your online E3 and such and such. So,
which makes sense because you need to tie your buzz to a broader buzz or have earth-shattering news to get noticed.
I know, they got their Nintendo Direct. So what do they need E3 for? But I guess they're going in on it, so...
well, other than that, like what was the next buzz Nintendo was going to have until they announced dates for Breath of the Wild 2?
I don't know. The point is, be on the lookout for big hot newses from all the video game companies all at once in a blob around the time.
Oh, actually, there's a split. So Nintendo, Microsoft, Konami, and Ubisoft are like doubling down on E3 online. EA, Activision, and Sony are not going to be included at this time.
Right, yeah. And not every company's. It's going to be June 12th through 15th. So in early June, look for big video game news. Right? Yep. You can expect, April, May to actually be a dry spell for big AAA video game news because they're going to be holding their cards until E3. Right?
Yep.
Okay.
So in some other news, this happens often, but it's happening again for another platform, so it's worth sort of just pointing at. But PS Vita or Vita games, I never had one, but there were a lot of games that were released on that thing that were exclusive to it. Like they were developed for it. They only came out on it. Yeah. There wasn't like a PC version. There were a lot of
games that were exclusive to PSP, PS Vita, whatever, all the portable PlayStations, of which there probably will never be another one. I guess I can't guarantee that, but it seems likely.
Yep.
And there were there were some good games on there, some exclusive ones, and some of them got ported to other systems and some of them didn't. I think the Switch is like a really good destination. Any developers or publishers that put games out on those platforms would do well to just shove them in the Switch eShop.
100%. The tricky part seems that a lot of the companies that made these things are either gone or have changed radically, don't have the resources to do a port, and probably couldn't make enough money to justify the port. So there's sort of a race to preserve these games somehow.
Right. You'll probably see things like, I remember there being like a PSP Contra or something that wasn't on anything else. That's how old my memory is. That was when I was in college.
Yep.
Right. But it's like, yeah, you can see probably, maybe it was re-released and I didn't notice, but it'll probably be like in the future, like, PSP Mega Pack, and it'll be like, $10, 10 PSP games, and some bundle running on who knows what platform.
Yep.
Right?
Well, just like on the Switch, we have these compilations of like, here's a bunch of old arcade games in a package.
Every Mega Man game, $50, whatever, all that kind
Those are still my weakness. Whenever there's a package of like, hey, here's every game in some series that you've played a little bit of, part of my brain says, oh, I should just buy that. So I have it.
Good thing I have my policy now of...
Yep, I have implemented the similar policy of I only buy a game if the price, it's on sale to the point that it rounds down to 0, or I am going to play it as soon as it finishes downloading.
Yes.
Like, I'm going to sit there and wait for it to download, and then I'm going to play it.
Even if a game is mine is even more strict. Even if it's 1 penny, I won't buy it unless I am going to install it and play it immediately. If it's $0, okay, yeah, then I'll just whatever. It costs $0.
I did at the last second buy that Mario 3D compilation, the anniversary one.
Oh, I had no need for that.
I bought it in cartridge form, so I can
have all the games in the compilation. What do I need the?
Yeah, I don't, because I was sponging off of your Wii and your GameCube for many years.
Anyway.
I never owned either of those consoles myself.
Okay, well.
But yeah, all these games are disappearing. Same old story. I got a link to it right here. I got a little news. This is, you might have seen this. It kind of made it made the rounds on like the Reddits and everything. But if you don't know who Magnus Carlsen is, he's the reigning chess world champion. Like
chess guy.
Yeah, the chess champion. In a recent game against Hikaru Nakamura during a tournament, he did something that the internet noticed. And by the internet, I mean even the non-chess internet. He played an opening that is kind of a joke on the internet that is specifically known as the bongcloud. It is the best way I can describe this. I'll link to this. You can watch a video.
What a great name.
You know what this opening is? Do fucking ridiculous nonsense and try to put the game in such a broken state that both players are just lost in a fog, and may the best player win.
Okay.
Break the game and see what happens.
He's just bored doing the same old, so he went and let loose the bongcloud,
Yeah,
but
apparently this opening was like known among like people who play chess online, but like no one played it in like a super serious tournament. And the internet like noticed that this was happening. There was a whole thing around it.
He probably learned about it from the internet. Famous people on the internet too. He can read Reddit, right? He can read.
Yep, like Emily and I were talking the other day. Like Justin Bieber, big Leafs fan, like talks about them a lot just randomly online. Like. People who
on Leafs Reddit or Leafs Twitter,
Yeah, like people who are famous like things and are fans of other people who are more or less famous.
Yeah, they're reading the same shit you're reading. They know what's going on.
Yeah, there isn't like a secret Twitter just for...
Probably knows it's called the bongcloud. He's like, you know what? It is like, if I lose this tournament, that's not a big deal.
Well, even better, this tiny thumbnail I can barely see just from the news page I got up. I see a stream and it looks like both of the players are like one of them's laughing and the other one is clearly like trying to stifle a laugh as the opening proceeds. Like,
yeah,
but this all
both know about the bongcloud, right? Come on.
But it also speaks to something we've talked about a lot, not as much on GeekNights, but we talk about this a lot in panels we do, around how chess has this end game where all the attractors in the math of chess are draws. AIs are pushing chess to the point to where...
Who won the bongcloud game?
I don't actually know, and I'm going to find out later, because I didn't actually read...
So I've always been sort of meh on chess because I don't like to memorize openings and stuff. But the fact that there's an opening called the bongcloud, maybe I should memorize that opening and not learn anything. I'm not interested in learning anything more about chess than I already know, right? I just sort of play naturally. Like I look a few moves ahead. Okay, I'll kill 2 of your guys and you'll kill 1 of mine. That seems good.
Here, I'll read.
That's how I play.
Playing the e-pawn first is a very natural opening in chess. But moving the king up to e2 is essentially always a terrible second move.
The point is I should learn the bongcloud and just play it until the opening's over, and then from there just play naturally, just however I feel like.
Yep. I don't even know what I have.
Play
I can't imagine what the end game looks like for the bongcloud. I'm actually there's a long.
I don't know what the early game looks like.
Yeah.
For bongcloud.
I have not watched the full video of this game yet.
This is the first I've heard of it. So.
It's like, ooh, I'm gonna start with the Polish opening, and then then Scott's across from me, and he just smiles. That king moves forward.
Anyway. I gotta talk about. I want to geek bite this little game here. So I don't know remember how I found this game. It's on Steam. It's $10, but you can play a free demo. You don't need to pay the $10. It's still early access, so you might want to wait for like the full version if you do want to pay the $10. I did pay the $10 because I did install it and play it immediately, and I've played it once in a while. Every few days I'll open it up and play it like one time. And the game is Luck Be a Landlord, obviously named after the Frank Sinatra song Luck Be a Lady. I don't know if that came from somewhere before Frank Sinatra. It may have, and I'm just not aware of it. But yeah, so what this game is something very clever. It is sort of a deck building game in a way, right? And where you start with 5 symbols.
It was Robert Alda first performed it.
Okay. You start with 5 symbols. And then after every spin of a slot machine, you add a symbol to the slot machine. So it starts out with like a cherry, a cat, a coin, and a couple other things, right? And it's like, okay, you spun the slot machine. You got this many coins. What do you want to add to your slot machine? A dwarf?
Like a goose,
a clam, or a goose, right? And it's like, okay, I guess I'll add the goose. And each thing you add to the slot machine has different rules surrounding it, right? So if a dwarf, it stops and he's adjacent to, meaning in the 8 spaces, next, not just orthogonally adjacent, just adjacent to the dwarf. If any of those contain an alcoholic beverage, the alcoholic beverage will be removed, and the dwarf will give you a whole bunch of coins because he, to pay for the beer.
Right? Oh no, this sounds good.
There's also like a bartender. The bartender has like a 10% chance of creating an alcoholic beverage. If you have a key and it ends adjacent to like a safe or a lockbox, the key and the lockbox both go away and a bunch of money comes out, right? So there's all these sorts of synergies between symbols. The thing is, no matter what symbols you get, I have not found anything better than cultists. It's like a cultist is 1 coin. 2 cultists means 2 coins each. They don't even have to be adjacent. 3 cultists, 3 coins each. 4 cultists, 4 coins each. You get it? Cultists are just the best. The only time I've gone deep in this game with huge payouts is with a lot of cultists.
Well, the game is early access. Maybe they'll nerf the cultists.
Maybe, but this game is actually updated rather frequently with significant updates.
Yeah.
And even a timer on the bottom left of the main menu that tells you how long until the next update launches.
Whoa! That's real fun.
There's also items. So like you can, after basically it's called Luck Be a Landlord because the story of this game is that you move into an apartment and you got to pay the rent. And the rent starts out at $25. So, and you have, I think, 6 spins of the slot machine, right? It's like, we put a slot machine in your apartment to help you pay rent. So
I feel like that's going to move from satire to truth within a decade.
Right, but you get a certain number of spins before you have to pay rent. And you start with 5 symbols, so you're going to get the rent on the first rent payment, no matter what, unless you really F it up, right? But then as soon as you pay rent, you get an item. You get to choose an item, which is like a permanent ability, sort of like a relic in Slay the Spire, as opposed to a card, right? And then it's like, okay, well, your next rent payment is even bigger, and you have this many spins to get to that next rent payment. And you keep doing this until eventually you pay the 777 rent. As soon as you pay the 777 rent, you've won the game, and then you enter endless mode if you would like to enter endless mode and keep paying exponentially
so
higher
it's
rent.
basically a deck builder, but the deck is a slot machine instead of a deck of cards.
It's a deck builder, but you don't draw hands or play hands. Your entire deck gets shuffled on a slot machine, and 25 of the symbols in your slot of the available ones you have appear in a random arrangement on the grid and then score appropriately, and sometimes get consumed, meaning they're removed from your deck for the next spin.
Well, I see one like coal after 20 spins turns into a diamond.
Diamonds are pretty great because they're sort of like cultists, in which cultists are 1 by default. Diamonds are, I think, 5 by default. And the more diamonds you have, they all increase each other's value, similar to cultists. So diamonds are like the ultimate thing. Just a screen full of diamonds, I think, might be the highest possible payout you could get, because it would be 5 times 25 plus some huge. I don't even know the math on that. It's big.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot. And the thing is, a lot of the symbols and the interactions between the symbols and the items are just a whole lot of fun and are really cute and wholesome most of the time. Like, you have a thief. The thief, every time he shows up, takes a coin from you. But when you catch the thief, either with a banana peel or with the bounty hunter or with like General Zaroff, who kills all humans, then you'll get every thief the coin stole, you will get back ×4.
Oh.
So
apparently also very important news. There's a dog and you can pet the dog.
Yep, there's a lot of stuff going on in this game. So it's a really cute, fun, single player, like very brief thing to do, and it changes every so often. So like every day or two, I'll open it up and play it one time, usually while I'm waiting for something else, like a GeekNights to start or something of that nature, right? I'll just open it up. Like if I've got Steam and we're going to play Civ and everyone's still chatting, I'll just open it up, play it one time, and then, the Civ's ready. Okay, close my slot machine. So I recommend this, and it's still early access, $10 game. I recommend it.
Yeah.
Nice and cute and fun.
All right, we can probably go into things of the day from there. That's enough. We talked long enough on that news.
Yep. All right, now I can run the 8E properly.
Ooh.
Let's see how I can do this.
I can do my thing of the day first while you look at that. But anyway, things of the day. So check this. This is a video from 2018. I didn't know this was at the Met. But basically, this is the oldest piano in the world from the early 1700s. Like, it's the oldest one that exists. Not only does it exist, but it's playable. And this is a video of someone playing the oldest piano in the world. That is pretty fascinating in and of itself. And there's a little bit of explanation about, like, how it was built and where it came from and how the guy who made it wasn't actually trying to invent the piano. He was actually trying to do something else. And if you're interested in this, the rabbit hole you can follow on the origins of the piano and where, like, the clavichord and, like, what happened to the harpsichord, there is so much nonsense there that is way more complicated than you would ever expect. But it sounds pretty good for an instrument from the 1700s that is still working and not just like a brass instrument.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if your job was to maintain this thing, though. Like, don't break it. I think there's a little bit of Ship of Theseus going on, but it is like the original keys as far as I've read. Like, almost everything on it is original, except I think they've replaced a lot of the strings of these as they've broken over the years.
Oh, okay.
Probably some of the pads, too, I assume. So what do you got?
What do I have as my thing of the day? Let me see.
I know you're trying to run that train.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So I haven't. This is fan fiction that someone posted to an archive of our own. I don't think I've ever done a fan fiction as thing of the day before because I don't read fan fiction. I know of it. I respect it, but I don't. It's not my thing, right?
The last one I read was at RIT when we read Sailor Moon Saves the Furries out loud in Capstone that one time.
Okay. But yeah, someone named, I guess, Mewd, M-E-W-D. I think that's the author's name there. I saw this on Twitter. Someone linked to it, and it's the name of the fan fiction really caught me. And then I read the summary, and that caught me. And I read the first page/chapter, and that was enough for me to know that I could make this a thing of the day. I haven't read the whole thing, so let me just read you this summary and the title in the summary. The title is Daisy and Waluigi Dreamstar Wannabes by Mewd. Summary.
I'm already intrigued just that it's Daisy and Waluigi.
Summary, Princess Daisy and Waluigi team up to upstage Mario and become big shot heroes and destroy and or save the world in the process and maybe fall in love if there's time after that.
Wow.
A sprawling, novel-length romantic comedy action Nintendo adventure where Daisy confronts her past, her feelings of self-worth, and her feelings for Waluigi.
Sprawling novel length. Okay, so there's a lot here.
There's a lot going. I mean, just have the summary be the thing of the day. I can't tell you if you should read on beyond the chapter 1, but like, you know,
there are 38 chapters in this thing.
If you are gonna write a fan fiction, that is the bar for a compelling summary to get people to care about it, right? So, have a go.
I'm just skimming it. Mouser, Fry Guy, Claw Grip, and Triclide are all in it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Those are some of my boys.
Yep.
In the meta moment, I'm still stuck inside. Like, not much is happening. You'll see us probably in some PAX Online. Like, whatever that looks like, we'll probably be on that. We have a sprawling internet presence, so check us out at all the places we exist. And
yes, I've been working on a thing because I want to make it, you know, we keep saying this. I'm making a thing where all of the places that GeekNights has an online presence, I'm going to make one page somewhere that you can go to that just has links to every place GeekNights exists on the internet. And we're sort of organizing all those places in a spreadsheet. So let me just list for you the 30, almost 29 places so far that we've discovered.
So far,
online presence.
There's definitely more.
So we have a website, right? You can email us. We have Twitter, GeekNights Twitter, but there's also my Twitter and Rim's Twitter.
Yep.
Right? We have 3 YouTube channels, mine, Rim's, and an official GeekNights one that was barely used that we don't really use anymore.
Yep, for reasons we've talked about.
We have a Discord. We have our old forum, which is archived in read-only mode, and a new forum, which is active. We are on Spotify. We're on iTunes. We have a GeekNights email newsletter. I should write one of those.
Oh, yeah, you should. I like those. Are very good.
It's been a while. We have a Facebook page that we don't post to. I guess it's a Facebook page / group. Who knows? We got the Patreon that you shouldn't give money to.
Yeah.
We have an Instagram. We have a GeekNights Twitch, and there's also my personal Twitch.
Now, you didn't say me. I actually don't have a Twitch channel.
Okay. We have a code of conduct, I guess, / GitHub, kinda. You know, I don't know. That we have a GeekNights Reddit that no one uses.
Nah.
We have you can find there's on Board Game Geek. There is a listing for our podcast, as well as Rim. Whenever we do board game reviews, right? Rim makes a YouTube video that's just the review and then attaches it to the board game. So if you go to Board Game Geek and you find a game, there in the video section on the game on Board Game Geek, you may see a GeekNights YouTube video there.
Yep. A surprising amount of traffic comes from that. Like, you'd be surprised.
We have a Steam group and Steam curator page. So those are sort of the same thing, 1.5 things, right? We have our official RSS feeds. We have many of them. You can, I don't know how many of them still work, but they're there. We are on Google Podcasts. We're on Amazon Podcasts. Rim made a LinkedIn page where he said that he basically, instead of a company page, he made GeekNights as a company on LinkedIn that someone could theoretically be an employee of.
Yep.
I guess maybe I should attach myself to it. I don't know.
I forgot about it until Scott was asking me to find places we're not thinking of, and I bumped into it by accident. I made that so long ago because, real talk, I put GeekNights on my actual resume. When I got my current job, they asked me about it, and I was like, yes, this is this thing I do. It's a whole big thing. I'm gonna keep doing it, or I'm not gonna work here.
The point is that the final one that we know that we've managed to list so far is Amazon. We have an Amazon fashion page where you can buy a GeekNights t-shirt directly from Amazon.
And I'll spoil it now. There are more GeekNights t-shirts with our new logos coming there. They are I have been working on those for the last couple weeks.
Yep.
Shop.frontroker.com.
We had an IRC channel at some point. I don't know if it still exists, but there are logs of that IRC channel. And also, this doesn't include all of this only includes things that I consider to be GeekNights things, right? A GeekNights listener, follow me on Twitter. It's all right, but I guess I have a personal Instagram. You can find it. You know what my internet name is, right? But it's that's not a GeekNights thing.
Yeah, I have a Flickr. It's public, but it's not the GeekNights Flickr. If I take a bunch of photos for GeekNights, I'm going to publish them somewhere else where you'll all see them.
Right. But my personal YouTube, my personal Twitter, those are more GeekNightsy, right?
Well, my personal
Twitch,
YouTube effectively is the GeekNights YouTube, just because that's how it evolved.
There are some things that are my personal thing or Rim's personal thing that are also a GeekNights thing, kinda, and some that aren't, right? It's so take that as you will. Right?
Yep. Otherwise, we're we're reading the Tale of Genji.
Sure.
So read along with us. It's the first novel. Like, read the first one. We should see the first of anything.
If before you read Daisy and Waluigi, Dreamstar Wannabes, right? The newest, greatest novel in the history of humans, right? You got to start with the first novel in the history.
Genji's just kind of going. Like, just gets into trouble, gets out of trouble. Consequences happen mostly to other people.
Yeah.
That's what I'm taking away from this so far.
Okay, so let us go to the main bit, and then I need dinner.
All right. So let me jump right into that. Let me pause that. There we go. Okay. So JRPGs, we've never really talked about like that on Geek Nights, except tangentially.
Well,
and
I think what happened is Tuesday is a day where we're always playing games more often than other things. We always have a game to talk about usually, or a convention will at least refresh the pool. And so we haven't had to resort to like, more generic sort of conceptual show ideas for Tuesdays as we do on other days.
But also
we have done a few Tuesday shows on like shmups or things, right? Like more just targeting a whole genre at once. But we haven't done a lot of those. So we're like, well, we haven't actually both played a new game, that we haven't done a show on recently.
There's 2 new FPSs I'm going to try out this weekend.
Oh, okay. And there are a lot of games coming up soon that I think we'll both play.
Yep.
Like that one that I linked to that I discovered today. That's like an XCOM plus Slay the Spire combo, possibly.
Yep, I'm worried about that one because it might be too good for me.
Exactly.
But also, we're playing a lot of games we've played before and already reviewed on Geek Nights too. Like, I'm playing a lot of Overwatch
show or another train game show.
Yep, it's way too soon to talk about Hearts of Iron or Stellaris.
So I was like, hey, let's just do a genre show. We'll talk about a whole genre of games in general. Which there are many genres we haven't discussed. Pick one. Pick JRPGs. Okay, let's talk about JRPGs.
Yeah. Now, full disclosure, I don't like JRPGs anymore. Like, for the most part. Like, I don't play modern ones. I keep an eye on them, like, I learn about them, but I tend not to play them. But at the same time, as much as I want to say I can't deal with those mechanics, I am playing Final Fantasy IV randomizers for some reason. Right. And also, sometimes I feel this urge to go level up in a JRPG, like just poking Final Fantasy I in an emulator. It's weird.
Yeah. So it's very strange how, we had the D&D, right? The pen and paper RPGs.
Yep.
Predating, for example, the the RPGs that were on the various PCs, right?
And they varied widely.
Spectrums and Commodores and Amigas and DOS and, all those old PC platforms, Commodores, Apples, right? There were all kinds of RPGs on those platforms. And then once, in Japan, you had them on, the MSX or the FM Towns or the PC9, all kinds of different platforms.
And there's all these different lineages of these games. Like, we can't even get into that history. Like, Ultima came from a very different world from some of these other games.
Right. But that core mechanic there, right, of, the combat of D&D was just brought over to video games, right, in this sort of fashion where it's like you're still calling it an RPG when there's like the role-playing element is like, where is it? You're not.
That was our first PAX panel, that Beyond D&D, the original version of that, where we talked a lot about it's a role-playing game, but what actual role-playing are you doing?
Right. Or even if you are, it's like you're limited to just like this subset of actions, right? If you play like a gold box game or a Shadowgate, those aren't JRPGs, obviously, but they're still computer versions, right? Because computers are so limited then, and they still, even today, still are quite limited, right? When you're playing a tabletop RPG, even if it's just a dungeon crawly one where you're fighting monsters and traps and doing all these things, your human brains, the fact that you have a human GM possibly, depending on the game, you said this wealth of basically infinite possibilities. It's like, I can do all this stuff with my 10-foot pole. What if I poke the bee's nest with it, right? It's like, whereas in a computer game, even today, it's like, if they don't program in that specific possibility, it's not a possibility.
Yep.
Right? So the JRPG is like comes out of the fact that they were even more limited in those days. They wanted to translate that tabletop D&D experience to the computer, and the American game developers and British game developers did it in certain ways, and the Japanese game developers did it in the Dragon Quest Final Fantasy way.
Though
right?
it's interesting because at the same time, the actual Japanese role-playing game space at the time was a lot broader than what Americans recognized. And back then, no one called those JRPGs. They were just RPGs. And the most popular RPGs in America at the time ended up being the ones that were mostly on the NES and SNES, just due to that was when gaming started to become more mainstream. That was a very accessible, popular, affordable console for a lot of people, those two consoles. So that was right around when Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest were also available in the US. So a lot of people, the term JRPG came way later to try to differentiate one subset of Japanese RPGs that are themselves together a subset of digital RPGs. And the term is not the fact, even though it stands for a Japanese role-playing game, it's not really a useful or accurate term, because Japanese role-playing games are far more diverse than most people would. Hydlide arguably comes from that same lineage, but no one who played Hydlide today in America would say, oh, that's a JRPG.
Right. The common tropes of a JRPG, right, is that there's some sort of overworld, right, that you walk around on, and there's random encounters, right, and then there's going to be some sort of turn-based combat where positioning usually doesn't matter too much. It's usually you're choosing just an actions per character, right? Fight, run, magic spell, special ability of some kind, right? Like steal or something. The bad guys go, you have hit points, you don't want to die.
Yep.
You go to towns, you talk to people, you go to dungeons, you walk around. There's random encounters in the dungeon, but also boss battles, but also treasure chests full of items. And then, through talking to the characters, and also cutscenes and dialogue and boss dialogue and things of that nature, there's usually this really very involved, sort of epic fantasy story, usually a fantasy or sci-fi story that unfolds sometimes with cutscenes and cinematics and all sorts of other embellishments, usually fantastic music of some kind. And those elements together is usually what makes a JRPG versus a Skyrim, which is definitely a computer video game RPG that doesn't really have all of those elements.
Yep,
right?
But at the same time, while we're calling the show JRPGs and we're going to talk about these same kinds of games, I don't think that term is useful, because even game nerds all disagree on exactly what it means. If you say it means any role-playing game made in Japan, most of them are nothing like what we're describing.
Right. I think it's useful in basic.
And arguably, The Legend of Zelda is an action JRPG, an AJRPG. There's no consistency in this nomenclature.
The way I use it, and I think the only useful way to use it, is basically a short way of saying a game that's very similar to Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, etc.
That's what we're going with. But even there, so
along those lines.
So I pulled up a Wikipedia page that is interesting because it's a list of the
Blade,
Lunar,
kind of, right?
Those Lunar games that we know some people are obsessed with.
Right, yeah, all those.
Ys, Wanderers from Ys and all that, or Wise.
Ys is more of an action one.
Yeah, it depends. They're actually all kind of different, because there was the one that a lot of Americans were familiar with on the SNES, which was
Lufia.
Yeah, Lufia. Breath of Fire.
Yeah, I said Breath of Fire.
Yeah, I wasn't listening to you. I was looking at this page. I got this list here. It's a Wikipedia page of the best-selling Japanese role-playing game franchises
Pokemon,
of all time.
Earthbound.
Yep. So this is fascinating. This is franchise-based. These are the best-selling Japanese role-playing game franchises.
Pokemon is number one by
Pokemon is number one by double.
Of course.
Number two is Final Fantasy. So take every Final Fantasy anyone ever bought on any platform, and the Pokemons have sold about double.
Okay. Makes sense.
Dragon Quest is about half again down. And then there's a long tail. And it's interesting because it's like Monster Hunter, Kingdom Hearts, Souls.
Monster Hunter is an action,
Already, yeah.
game,
But
right. That's
it is a Japanese role-playing game franchise.
It's not. There's nothing role playing about it, really. It's an action game.
Action RPG, like Legend of
It's not
Zelda.
random encounters. You're not walking around the map. You're not.
This is what I'm saying.
It's not like Final Fantasy or like.
But that's just our working definition for this.
Useful definition of it.
I just really want to drive home the fact that the concept of JRPGs as a genre is silly. And if you're going to have a conversation like this, you actually need to describe what you're talking about because no one's going to agree with you, at all. But the funniest thing about this is that one of the franchises listed, it's like 15 down, like it's very high on the list, is just called Chrono. Because it's Chrono Trigger, which consists of 2 games. One of which was bad, in my opinion.
Chrono Cross.
Chrono Cross was not a good game. I did not even finish it. I could not stand it. And Radical Dreamers is not listed because that's anyway.
So let's talk about games like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, etc.
Because I first encountered this.
Right when I was young, I actually didn't have games like that. Right. Those were not the games that I would buy for the consoles that I had.
Those were the games I was the most obsessed with as a kid. Like I got soon as
I think had I bought a Super Nintendo, I probably would have had Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger earlier and then played.
Oh, see, I started way earlier on the NES when I got my NES. So I upgraded from the Atari to the NES. Final Fantasy 1 was one of the first games I got.
Yeah, see, I didn't play Final Fantasy anything until I basically had emulators in the later 90s, like 90s.
Yeah. So I played Final Fantasy 1, and I was enough of a nerd. So when the SNES came out, I got Final Fantasy 2 and 3, and I was obsessed with them. It's scary to think that I was playing, because I have this vivid memory, I was playing Final Fantasy 4, which I knew was 2, on the Super Nintendo, when I was home from school for lunch in elementary school.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this memory of I got as far as the antlion. I hadn't saved my game, and my mom said it was time to go back to school, but I had to beat the boss, and she wouldn't let me, and I had to do that whole fucking dungeon again, and I was mad about it for probably an hour, and then I forgot, but it feels like I was mad for years.
Yeah. So at the time that I really started playing them, right, those late 90s, I was like, whoa, these games, I've seen them in magazines, right? But I finally understood, that's what these games were. Because I was somehow, despite not having really played them that much, all those tropes, right, I already somehow had learned those from somewhere. Like I knew how to play them even though I hadn't. Right.
Yeah, you kind of absorb it if you're a gamer.
I opened Final Fantasy 1 in Nesticle, right, the emulator, right? I knew exactly how to play it. Like everything in there was completely familiar to me.
Because it's a well-designed game. Like the heuristics it provides.
There was not any game that I had the NES cartridge for that even remotely resembled it, right, in any way. And it's not the kind of game that you would play at a friend's house, right?
Now,
it's definitely a long single-player deal.
The problem I ran into is that on the NES, Ultima Exodus and Ultima Avatar, to a kid who doesn't know better in an era where there isn't an internet, they just looked like RPGs. I was like, oh, I bet it's like Final Fantasy. And in a lot of ways, they are. Like, I'd argue they're in the same genre. Mm-hmm. But those games were just inscrutable, impossible nonsense to me as a kid. I could not, like Final Fantasy 1, despite kid brain, I played it with the aim of beating it. Like I knew there's something to beat and I tried. But when I played Ultima Exodus at the same age, I would just wander around the world and at no point have this concept of this is a game that I could beat.
Well, I think that comes down to the linearity, right? We sort of view linearity as a negative in some ways, right? It's like you want this open-ended game where you can do what you want. It's like the dream. And it's like you have something like an Ultima and it's like, all right. And it's like, what the hell do I do? You need, you just not.
I mean, it's not all open-ended. There's a very specific path to win that game. You can just approach it in any order. The problem is not so much
clear.
It's not, the game doesn't tell you shit. And in Final Fantasy or even Simon's Quest, as another example, even if the characters, the translation's bad and the characters don't say useful things, you can figure out the puzzles pretty intuitively. In Ultima, The puzzles are things like, yeah, if you talk to these 10 villagers across these 10 different places, you'll eventually figure out that in this one map, when the moon is a certain way, walk forward 3 spaces, left 2 spaces, and search that empty spot that doesn't look any different from any other spot in the world. And you'll find a game necessary item.
Mm-hmm.
Like, very different philosophy of design, even though superficially they were very similar.
Right. So with the JRPG side, it's much more linear. It's like you can only go one place, and
Yep.
you can go maybe sometimes places you've already been, and
Or
just
you
fight
can
more
get to
bad
places
guys.
that are a little too dangerous and you kind of avoid them, or you figure out a way to do them, but you're always gated. Like, the scope of
Right.
your world expands and expands, and a lot of them, especially the Final Fantasies, this trope I know is in a lot of other games, they open up after they have taught you like what's going on, usually by giving you effectively the airship.
Yep.
Like, that was a trope for so long of, okay, now I got the airship, now I can go anywhere.
But even if you are opened up, it's like most of the places you can go are all the old places and one new place.
Yep.
Right. And it's like there's always some sort of gating, either by danger of random encounters that will just kill you if you go to the wrong place, or you literally can't go to a place, or you went to a place, but it's not the time to go to that place yet. So you're just sort of seeing that this town exists, but it doesn't matter. You're just here, whatever. And when you come back to the town later, and it's like, now this town does something, right?
But I do think a lot of them do have a moment where they get a little bit rudderless on purpose. Like, the game has gated you for so long, and then finally it's like, all right, now you can just go anywhere. And suddenly you explore the world and find all these interesting things to poke at. And usually that's when there's a lot of side quests and things that aren't strictly necessary to win you can do. But eventually, even if you don't try to beat the game, you'll poke at everything, and the game sort of like guides you back toward the critical path to actually beating it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's usually the games will do that because most of them, really confer like this sort of, you don't see a lot of small JRPGs, right?
Yeah.
They're long and big, right? So you can't really confer that sense of big and epicness to the player without sort of opening the world to them in that way, right? So it's sort of you do the timing and fashion in which that is done.
Yep, like Final Fantasy 1. You walk around the world. Yep, you get the bridge.
And then these credits play like, okay, now the world. Whoa,
but then you're thinking, okay, the world, and then you find a ship, and then you're like, oh, the world. But then if you try to go north, there's a whole continent that doesn't have a single port, and you're like, wonder what's up with that. And then when you get the airship, you're like, oh, I'm going up there. I've been waiting to get up there my entire childhood. Here I come.
Yeah, or, sometimes, there's usually also some point in most of them where it's a common trope to go to like a different world, right? It's like you go to the moon, or some sort of hell, or magic land, or something.
World of ruin.
Yeah, something like that. And it's like, there's like a terrible secret of space that you've discovered in the plot, right? Here's the truth, and that's why there's always like they call it a square boss, named after the company Square.
Yep.
The bad guy that you've known the whole time, that's the main bad guy, right? You think they're going to be the final boss. You beat them, and it's like, aha, it was actually and there's an even bigger boss.
Yep.
And Mega Man 2 does the same thing.
Fuck you, Galbez. Wait, Zemus, what's that?
Right, it's like you beat Wily, and then there's like another skull, and then you fight this robot alien Wily. Spoilers for Mega Man 2.
Yeah, it was Wily all along.
Exactly. Wily was controlling the alien robot with the remote control. Anyway, almost all the JRPGs do that same exact thing, where it's like, it's this bad guy. No, it's actually this like god that's the bad guy. Some guy, some elder, thing from another dimension is true evil.
But another very common trope.
True evil is just a guy. It's like, actually, he had this much power and was possessed by 10 demons.
Yeah. But there's also
epic ending.
These games, because they're not usually real time or time, like there's no dexterity component to them. Sometimes, like, obviously, a lot of exceptions, but there's grinding and leveling up as a mechanic, and especially the early ones for a long time, that was a primary mechanic. And this is where, like, as a reviewer, on one hand, like, I don't got time for that shit in my adult life. But on the other hand, I cannot ignore the fact that was extremely satisfying to me when I was younger. Like
if you got time,
I would like not
you
just
haven't
time.
become bored of it yet.
Yep. I would like walk back and forth next to Elfland, like fighting trolls to get that silver sword. I was enjoying every second of that. Like, I can't pretend I didn't. It's not like I sprang forth from Zeus knowing that grinding is bad.
For me, it wasn't that I enjoyed the grinding, it's that I was more tolerant of it in those days. And then the reward of getting the silver sword, finally affording it, and then just mowing down people with the silver sword.
Yep.
That reward was so satisfying, it was worth
It was almost like the pain.
suffering
We've
of
talked about this
grinding.
in panels before. A certain amount of pain, like say a Super Meat Boy, increases the pleasure of completion. The pain just can't be too deep. But when we were young, we had an infinite capacity for that kind of pain.
Exactly. But yeah, it's like that mechanic of random encounters, as bad and lazy as it is now, it's like there is something to it, right? To sort of fill, if it's like if you just took that out completely, right? It's like, okay, well now if there's no random encounters, then the fun parts that I like, for example, like getting items, right? Going shopping, learning magic spells, those have lost all meaning now. It's like, who cares? Right?
Yeah.
I don't want to learn. I don't want to get items anymore. I don't care about getting gold because there's no random encounters right? It's like they put this bad thing in the game that's unfun in order to make it fun, to get things to make the unfun part go away.
Yep.
Right? It's like, it's like the goal of capitalism is to escape capitalism, right? The goal of the JRPG is to escape the horrible random encounters that they're not a problem anymore. Earthbound, I think, did really great where if you bump into a bad guy that's too easy, you just automatically win.
Yep.
Right?
I think it should have been a little more liberal with that because its rule was if that enemy could not hurt you in any way, if it could possibly do even one damage, you'd have to fight it.
Exactly. But you could usually kill it in one shot if that was the case. If it was really weak.
Yep. But some of them, like Final Fantasy IV, was always interesting to me in that the random encounters was what was a resource game. Like, do I have enough resources to get to the next like checkpoint? But then the boss fights were actually kind of like serious puzzles, more so than a lot of other JRPGs I had played. And that is a common theme of the bosses will have complexity. That is a combination of knowledge and skill of how to deal with them based on what level you're at and what you've got. And I always found that really satisfying. Like, I think the reason Final Fantasy IV has such a relatively large randomizer scene, like as small as it is, like it's the biggest of the RPG randomizer scenes that I can see. I think it's because it's basically a boss rush, and the bosses in Final Fantasy IV were really interesting, especially compared to other similar JRPGs from the era Final Fantasy IV came out.
The better JRPGs definitely, have more complex or interesting combat systems. To some of them good, some of them bad, right?
Yep.
Everyone's different. We're not going to get into all the different ones.
Like honestly,
maybe I'll complain about Final Fantasy VIII, but
Chrono Trigger combat I didn't find fun. I liked everything else about that game.
But the point is, the good ones usually have some sort of puzzly element where it's not just do your highest DPS attack, heal when you're low, repeat. And usually they'll be structured in such a way to where, sure, they're all, if it has leveling up, mathematically, it's always going to be possible to grind and level up so much given enough time to blow past any amount of puzzles and just beat every guy, right? Which always a way.
Honestly,
possible, right?
In Final Fantasy VI, that's what I did. My end game in Final Fantasy VI was just 4 characters casting Ultima constantly.
Right. So like that's always going to be possible as long as leveling up is a thing. But the good JRPGs, the ones that are better, will have some sort of way where if you're clever and you figure it out, then you can, with much less resources, with much less grinding, find a way through, right? Oh, if I'm clever and I use this, and sometimes it's simple.
Like what Ashura in Final Fantasy IV keeps healing herself. Serious boss, late game, keeps healing herself. Cast wall on her. Like, that's a clever bit. I remember I didn't figure that out on my own. Someone told me.
Right. Now, some of that stuff, I think a lot of it actually ends up just being knowledge and not really skill. And
well, like I said, someone told me. I didn't figure it out on my own.
Like, if you know it, then you know it. It's not are you good enough, right? It's like, just, do you know a thing?
Mm.
It's like if you have some knowledge, well, now you can grind less because you know a secret, right? It's like, okay, great. It's not very satisfying.
Yep.
But at least it's better than just, the only way through is grinding, right? It takes this many hours to beat this game, the end.
Yep. But it also points out something about the way like we and like game reviewers talk. Think again about like Final Fantasy 1 and like when you even said when you finally picked those games up, they were very intuitive even though you'd never really played them before. That linear, grindy, relatively simple mechanism in a game, even if like say Rim and Scott have outgrown it, it's worth noting that for a young Rim and Scott, those were killer mechanics.
There's an unbelievable game.
Like,
if I had those games like some years sooner, I would have been like, oh my God, this is the greatest game.
Yep. I was like ridiculously obsessed with min-maxing my Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest games. I played all those Final Fantasy Legends and I played every RPG I could get my hands on, even the really bad ones.
For me, it was really just I wanted to know the freaking story, right? Because they had such good, music and characters and stories, and I wanted to, learn.
But I really wanted to know, like, ooh, the were sword. What does that actually do? I want to go find a werewolf now and hit it with it and see what happens. Like, I would want to see what things did in the game. But there was also an element that was the era where I started to become aware that, wait, this is Final Fantasy 2, but why did that nerd I met on Prodigy say it was Final Fantasy 4? And
I wasn't able to figure that out until the internet either. Right?
I learned it relatively early. I actually hosted in the early GeoCities days.
Video game magazines did not tell the secret, right?
I hosted a GeoCities site that had a partially translated Final Fantasy V ROM.
Okay.
I was really proud of that when I got it. But those, like that era, for me, the moment that I remember, and this gets back to these games were often a little glitchy and buggy and had weird stuff that wasn't well explained. At least for kids like me, it was exciting to discover them and try to solve that mystery. Because I got a summon that you're not supposed to be able to get in Final Fantasy 2 because it was removed it was only in 4. But in an SNES cartridge, there's glitches and things where you might get some of those summons for Rydia. And I got it, and I had friends who literally did not believe me that I had this summon, and I'd like show it to them, and they were like amazed by it. And it got into sort of that like creepypasta, unknown exploration, like no one can explain this to me, which no kid today could ever experience because they would just look it up. There's no way to bring that era back, I don't think.
No, I don't think so either. You need a Frog Fractions.
Fractions. Just go down.
The Frog Fractions person recently tweeted that like they put Frog Fractions 4 inside of. It's like what? It's like we can just decompile it though and take a look at the code and see if it's not, right? We don't need to trust them at their word, right? Just try to mess with us.
But yeah, I don't really play any modern what we would call a JRPG.
No, I don't. I just don't have time for that. It's too what I really like, and we've talked about this a bit when I talked about. I think I geek-bited Cloudpunk, and we also did a show recently on Heaven's Vault.
Yep. Don't waste my time.
Right. It's like you can get there are games now that are giving you parts of the RPG, the parts that I like at least, right? The explore the world, talk to people, epic plot. Sometimes multiple endings, right? The same with Chrono Trigger had.
Yep.
Right. So your choices matter for some replayability.
Or look at a very different genre. Slay the Spire gives me here's a bunch of complicated bosses and I got to figure out how to fight them.
Yeah. It's like just whichever part you want. I always made this analogy, so I'll make it again. Where imagine you went to the movie theater to watch Lord of the Rings or some epic movie. And you watch it for like 5 minutes, right? And that was the intro. That's just like you didn't even press start yet.
Yeah.
Right? And then, you watch it like the first scene, right? And then suddenly it pauses. And in front of you, there pops up like, they give you like a little tablet. And it's like on the tablet, it's like, here are some trivia questions. Answer them correctly, right? Or wait 10 minutes. And then if you answer them correctly or wait 10 minutes, then we will let you watch the next scene. Otherwise, watch this death scene and that's the end of the movie. The end, Frodo dies, right? It's like, and then go back to the quiz again, right? After you're watching the death scene. And it's like, if you had to watch a movie like that, it's like, you wouldn't watch the fucking movie. You'd be like, what the fuck is this bullshit? Just
even as a kid, I was always annoyed, like that concept of there's nothing different failure just prevents you from proceeding. I don't, as an adult and as someone who introspects why I enjoy games, I realize I'm not here for that. But I do recognize that for other types of gamers, especially younger gamers, those mechanics that I despise still hold value to them. And that's why there's such a thriving ecosystem of fairly grindy JRPGs that even today aren't substantially evolved from Final Fantasy VI.
I mean, they're evolved, but they're not, I think the fundamentals are still there. They've just really polished a lot of the outer edges, right? But yeah, it's like sometime around the college times, thanks to playing MUDs in high school, right, and learning things there, right, about grinding. When WoW came out and I saw people grinding there in the MMORPGs, that's when I sort of realized, like, hey, why can't I just play Final Fantasy VI without this fucking grinding shit, right?
That was my moment too, when I bounced off a WoW and I was like, wait a minute, fuck this. No,
right.
I refuse.
And my opinion's basically been the same since then, which is like, just let me fucking watch Lord of the Rings. I'm not going to stop and answer your goddamn quizzes.
Right before that, like, right before I went to RIT, I was playing The Realm and like grinding out, like killing imps to get 2 experience points for hours and hours and hours at a time to make a number go up. And there was nothing wrong with that in my eyes for some reason. And when I hit WoW, I bounced off of it. And then remember, a bunch of us at RIT got into, oh God, what was that MMO that we got into?
Yeah, I played Puzzle Pirates. That was pretty grindy.
Yeah, that one was pretty good.
Not a JRPG.
Yeah. But no, we played a couple of we played a Korean RPG at one point.
Oh, Ragnarok?
Ragnarok, that was the one. And
I just hit slimes for like a week. And
yeah, we were all grinding it, and then we all together were just like, wait a minute. This grind is just gonna unlock a slightly different grind, and I think we all uninstalled the game.
Rats instead of slimes. Ooh.
Yep. I tried to run to the end of the game, and it was just bigger numbers, grinding out bigger numbers, and there wasn't anything else there.
Yep. So yeah, that's the JRPG.
There's no moral to this one. That's just our
right.
thoughts on this space.
I think JRPGs these days, I think what they've done, especially we talk about the most popular one, Pokemon, right, is that to sort of, alleviate, I don't know, necessarily alleviate, but to sort of appeal to a broader audience of people who may not just want to grind and level up, is they add all sorts of other things. Dragon Quest does this also.
A lot of grindy mechanics that are not game necessary.
Right, there's fashion and there's side games.
Go grow your berries and breed berries or whatever.
There's all sorts of other things going on in the game. Just all sorts of systems that may or may not interact with the combat system.
Look at the game of the year. Look at Hades. Dating sim, dialogue tree, unlocking relationships, plus like action RPG.
Right, exactly. They just put lots and lots of systems in there so that there's something for you to be interested in, something for you to spend your time in, something for everyone to, do. And yeah, eventually uncover the plot of some kind, right? So, and I do think, regardless of any other negative things about them game-wise, the plots, characters, stories of a lot of JRPGs are still really kind of epic and awesome a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And I really enjoy those kinds of stories, and I'd love to watch them on YouTube as opposed to playing them.
Yep.
Right? Because then I can get that story without wasting such a large portion of my life just pushing A and waiting for the next, to get to the next town. Right?
Yeah. What I wonder, I suspect we wouldn't feel differently because if we didn't have jobs, but somehow didn't need money, I think we would fill that vacuum trivially. But I do wonder if we had a lot of free time, would we be more tolerant? I think the answer is no.
I might be more tolerant in that, as long as it was an easier one, right? One that didn't, it depends on exactly how long it takes, right? It's like I might be able to get through, because I've played Pokemon games recently, and I usually get a few gyms in and then stop, right? I haven't beaten one since maybe. Well,
not that long ago, during COVID, I just fired up Final Fantasy 1 in an emulator because I was trying to test something. And before I knew it, I'd beaten Garland and the bridge appeared. And I was like, wait, Rim, you're actually playing. Stop. I had to catch myself.
Yeah, I played Final Fantasy 7, came out on Steam maybe a few years ago, and I went and I played that. I'm like, all right, I'll give this game one more shot, right? And I went and I played it and I got through. I was having a good time going through, seeing stuff I'd already seen before, going through. And then suddenly I got farther than I'd ever gotten before. And the world like opened up into this enormous world outside the town. And I didn't even know the game got that big. And I was like, what the fuck is this? I don't have time for this. And then I stopped playing. As soon as that was just so overwhelming to have that such big world open up and realize the game was going to be that long, and that made me stop playing.
Well, that's that rudderless moment assumes that you have like gotten invested in the game enough to where you're like chomping at the bit to get to that outer world. If the game hasn't hooked you before that rudderless moment, I think that's the moment most people would just bounce off of a game.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you weren't feeling Final Fantasy 1, as soon as you get that airship, you'll be like, oh, there are way too many things up north. I'm done. I'm out.
Yep. All right. So yeah, the future of JRPGs, I think they're just, they're
going to keep on evolving and merging with other genres.
I'm not paying enough attention to the scene to know like what the developments are and what.
I don't even finish Pokemon games these days.
Right. As an outsider, right, it just looks like they sort of keep doing, the same old, only, freshening and advancing and expanding, but not really revolutionizing, right? It's like, oh, here's another Final Fantasy. It's a lot like the other Final Fantasies, only better graphics, bigger, fancier, new combat system, more things to do, etc. Right? This one is different because it's dudes pushing a car or something, right? Because that was one of the recent-ish ones.
Yeah.
I guess that one's probably old by now, right? Knowing how old I am. And then they do how they do. I guess there's still an audience for it. And it's, it's just not, it sort of is and isn't for me at the same time, right?
Yep. And that's part of why I'm playing these randomizers, because I get to scratch that itch that's still there, buried deep. But it's a very concentrated experience that ends quickly. And it's just like I'm mainlining the part of those games that I like the most, which for Final Fantasies was, especially Final Fantasies 4 and earlier, was the boss rush. And the like looting more so than the plots. Really, it was Final Fantasy 6 and Chrono Trigger where I was more invested in the characters than I was in the game mechanics.
Mm.
And on that note, I think it's food time and such.
Yep.
All right.